Hello everyone, welcome back to the Flix Files. So we're into 1981. If you've not seen my previous video, I'm covering every year of the 1980s. And for each year that I'm talking about, I'm picking out movies from my collection that were made in that year. And hopefully by the end of this series of videos, when we get to the end of the 1980s, I will have presented a good range of movies that just show why the 1980s is my absolute favorite decade for movies. So let's get straight to it. I've got a few more movies to showcase in this one in comparison to 1980. And the first one is a horror movie, and it's a bloody excellent horror movie. I'm not a huge horror fan compared to some of the people that I know watch this channel. I like horror films, but I don't go out of my way to collect them, and certainly don't go out of my way to watch newer horror movies. I think most of the ones that I have are just ones that I grew up with, that I always liked, and this is one of them. And it's John Landis's An American Werewolf in London. And I first saw this on VHS. It was the first movie I ever watched on a VHS tape when we made the transition from Betamax. So whenever I think of this movie, I just remember us getting our first VHS recorder, and a friend of the family, I think it was, gave us this VHS tape because we didn't have any tapes and we didn't rent any out on the day that we got the machine. And it didn't have any labels or anything on it. And he just said, give this a spin. He didn't tell us what was on it or anything. And it turned out to be An American Werewolf in London. And that was the first movie we watched on the VHS video recorder. So what a way to start a new format. And it's just a fantastic movie. And the fact that John Landis kind of made a career up to this point making comedies. And certainly there are some quite funny moments in An American Werewolf in London. It has its tongue firmly in its cheek in certain scenes, but as a horror movie, it works fantastically well. And also that the fact that it's set in the United Kingdom just adds to it for me. And it's just a terrific movie. And I've got the Arrow release of it. And it's a terrific Blu-ray. I've said many times before that Arrow just keep knocking it out the park with their releases. If there's a movie that they are releasing that's a film that I like, then I'm definitely going to buy it, because they just go out of their way to provide a lot of worthwhile extras, and they take care to remaster the picture and things like that. So yeah, that's my first choice for 1981. So we're off to a terrific start. My second choice is a movie that I've already done a little deep dive video about. So if you haven't watched that, I'll put a link up here, and it's Terry Gilliam's Time Bandits. So I'm not going to go into it too much. You'd need to watch my other video, but oh my gosh, what a lovely, lovely movie. Terry Gilliam, I think this was his third theatrical feature after Holy Grail and Jabberwocky. And by this point, he was really getting into his stride, and certainly the movie that he did after this, which will feature in later in this series, is absolutely superb as well. But Time Bandits is just brilliant. There's not really anything you can fault it on. It's just a terrific story. It's really well told. It's got a fantastic supporting cast with the likes of Sean Connery and Ian Holm and David Warner. It's just superb. And if by some miracle you haven't seen Time Bandits, then out of all the movies that I'm talking about in this video, this would be the one that I would say you have to go and watch this first. Yeah, so there we are. So Time Bandits, absolutely fantastic. The next one, I said in my previous video that the 80s advanced two genres, and that was action and science fiction, and I stand by that. And as we start talking about the movies in this series, you'll start to see where I'm coming from. And the next movie that I've picked for 1981 kind of straddles both of those genres, and it's John Carpenter's Escape from New York. Terrific movie. Kurt Russell as Snake Plissken is just absolutely brilliant, and I can't imagine any other actor of that period playing this role. He plays it with such a coolness and an amount of badassery that just makes it just brilliant. And the whole idea of a futuristic Manhattan being turned into a like a penal colony for all the ne'er-do-wells and the people that society want to get rid of, and they're all kind of walled in this downtrodden Manhattan. And Snake Plissken is tasked to go in there to rescue the president, played by Donald Pleasance. It's just absolutely superb. And I'm one of the few people that also love the sequel, Escape from LA. I know it's a rehash of Escape from New York, and it's a much poorer rehash. But if Kurt Russell is playing Snake Plissken, then take my money, I'm there. And I think I was one of the 12 people that saw this at the cinema when it was released theatrically. I still remember going to see it at the cinema, and there was like 4 people sat in the theatre. But yeah, Escape from New York, absolutely brilliant. Fantastic score as well. All of John Carpenter's film scores are if you like your sort of synth music, electronic music, then John Carpenter is the man. He's absolutely brilliant at that. So my next one is an out-and-out science fiction movie, and it's Peter Hyam's Outland, starring Sean Connery. And this is a terrific movie, and even though it's not meant to be, I always think this is set in the same universe as Alien, and it has a lot of similarities to Alien in terms of its design and its look. And I'm sure I read somewhere that when they were doing pre-production on Outland and they were building the sets, they had access to leftovers from Alien, and it definitely has that kind of vibe to it with some of the interiors. It could easily be a Weyland-Yutani corporation that Sean Connery is working for in this movie. And I've done a video about other Peter Hyams movies that I have, because he's a really good sort of director for hire. He's tried his hand at pretty much every genre that there is, and he's made some really, really good films. And he did another science fiction movie later on in the 80s that we'll get to in another video that I really admire. But yeah, I've always liked Outland. I hope one day it will get a 4K release, because this is one movie that I would love to upgrade to. Even though the Blu-ray that I have is very good, I would imagine that this is one that would really benefit from having a really nice 4K restoration done on it. So my next one is an action movie, and 1981 is where we really start to see the growth of action movies in terms of raising the bar. And my God, did this movie do that. And of course, I'm talking about Steven Spielberg's Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I have this in the Indiana Jones 4K box set that came out a few years ago. And it's terrific quality. It's the best I've ever owned this movie in terms of its quality and the clarity of the picture. But as for the movie itself, it's just fantastic. Again, I can't imagine anyone faulting anything about this movie. I've said about Back to the Future as a movie that if anybody said they didn't really like Back to the Future as a film, then it would be very difficult for me to think that they would like any movie at all, because how can you fault that movie? And the same goes for Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's just perfect. And Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, he really encompassed that role, and not for a second when you're watching that movie do you think of Han Solo, which is testament to him as a physical actor and how he really threw himself into this film. And I've told this story in an older video, but I saw this at the cinema, and it's the only time that I can remember as a cinema goer in the United Kingdom where everyone clapped when the film ended. I've never known that happen before or since. And I think it just says everything that you need to know about this film and the brilliance of it. And it's aged really well. It still has a really good fast pace to it. The action and the choreography of the action is just absolutely fantastic. And I think I saw in an interview that Steven Spielberg said that the gift that this film gave back to him was that he can now watch it as just a normal audience member. So much time has passed from him making that movie that he can remove himself from the memories of making that film, and he can just enjoy it just as a normal patron like the rest of us, which I thought was absolutely lovely. So yeah, that's my next choice. And the film I've picked after that is another action movie, and this is a real cracker. This is, again, one of the movies of the very early 80s that started to raise the bar in terms of action films, and I'm talking about George Miller's Mad Max 2. I've seen the original Mad Max, which George Miller made a few years before this one, but Mad Max 2 was the first Mad Max movie that I ever saw, and it just completely blew me away as a movie. And I like the last 15-20 minutes of this movie where Mad Max is driving this petrol tanker and he's trying to draw all the nomads away in the other direction and acting as like a decoy while everyone else is driving in the other direction. And it's just a terrifically choreographed and a fantastic piece of action cinema. And the fact it was done on such a small budget as well is just incredible. And George Miller, bless him, to think that over 40 years have passed since the release of this movie, he still got it. He is a senior director that still has that fantastic eye and is just brilliant at creating exciting and intense action sequences. And we've only got Fury Road and Furiosa to prove that, how he's still got it. And I hope to God that he does manage to make his much touted Mad Max The Wastelands movie. I really hope that happens, because it deserves to happen, because they are two of the best movies of the 21st century as far as I'm concerned. And Mad Max 2 just stands up so well even now. And obviously that set off Mel Gibson's career, and he will appear again in this series as we go on. So I thought I'd throw in another little bonus movie at the end of this video. And I'm a massive James Bond fan. And there's a James Bond movie that was released in 1981 that, again, really raised the bar in terms of action films. Because prior to this, the last James Bond movie that was released was Moonraker in 1979. And although that was very successful, it was ridiculed because it kind of took the excessiveness aspect of it to the nth degree, and James Bond went into space and a lot of people just thought, oh, this is just a bit silly. And it was obviously cashing in on the Star Wars craze. So for the very next James Bond movie, the makers obviously thought, well, we need to bring him back down to earth and make it a bit more realistic. And they did a movie called For Your Eyes Only. And this was the first of a series of James Bond movies that was directed by a chap called John Glenn. And John Glenn worked in the Bond movies as an editor, I think, for a number of years. And this was his first stab at directing. And it's a really cracking action film. And the thing I like about it as a James Bond movie is it kind of throws everything at you in order to win you over. So we have a terrific car chase sequence. We have a terrific action sequence where he's on skis and he ends up going down a bobsleigh on skis. And we get a really good shootout sequence, and there's a really good underwater sequence. And there's a sequence near the end of the movie where he's climbing up the side of this mountain that's like really nail biting. And they just throw all these things into the pot to make a really cracking James Bond movie. And there are a couple of other James Bond movies that will come out in the 80s that I will mention as we go forward in this series. But I think this is the one that really did some course correction in terms of where James Bond was going to go throughout the 1980s after the excesses of Moonraker. So I think it's a worthy addition to my list of recommended films for 1981. And I have this in the 50th anniversary James Bond box set that was released in 2012. And that contained every movie up to Casino Royale, because it was that year that Skyfall was going to be released. So it's a really nice box set to have, and I'm hoping that at some point in the future there will be a 4K re-release of all the Bond movies, because as of me recording this video, they've already released the Daniel Craig films as a 4K set, and there is a Sean Connery 4K James Bond set coming out later this year. So inevitably there will be a Roger Moore one, but I'd rather get them all as one big set than buying them in dribs and drabs. So there we are. That's my choices for 1981. I hope you agree that they are worthwhile films. Each have their own particular merit and show off what 1981 had to offer. So we'll move on to 1982 in the next video. So I hope you'll stick around for that. So if you enjoyed that, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you soon, guys. Bye for now.